IXL Section BB.11, solving a quadratic equation using a quadratic formula. Okay, so in this IXL, we're going to practice using the quadratic formula. When do you use the quadratic formula? You use the quadratic formula when you have a quadratic equation that cannot be factored. Okay? I mean, it works for every quadratic equation. But when you have a quadratic equation that cannot be factored, the only way to find the answer is by using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is not given to you, as far as I know. I could be wrong on this, but I don't believe it's given to you on the Algebra 1 EOC. I may have to double check that though. What I'm getting at though is that you do have to memorize this, or you should have it memorized. Believe it or not, after you use it a couple of times, it's not difficult at all to memorize. At first, I know it may look like it's something that's too difficult to memorize, but it's actually not. Okay, now let me go over how to use this, how to use the formula in case you're not sure how to do it. Okay, so first of all, remember that a quadratic equation is usually written in this form. All right, and the reason I'm writing this out is to show you that you got to identify, before we could begin, you got to identify what is A, what is B, and what is C in this problem. All right, so in this problem, A is 4, B is also 4, and C is positive 1. I'm just getting the numbers from right here. So now all I'm going to do is substitute those values into the quadratic formula. When I substitute them, I'm going to get x equals negative 4 plus and minus the square root of b to the second power, so 4 to the second power, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 1, over 2 times a, which is 4 in this case. Okay, now we just got to simplify. Okay, so underneath the radical sign, first I'm going to simplify these three numbers here. All right, I'm going to multiply them. So it's going to be, let me try to make space and start over here. X equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of, all right, so first of all, 4 to the second power is 16. Okay, now right here, these three numbers, I'm going to multiply them together. Negative 4 times positive 4 is negative 16. Negative 16 times 1 is negative 16. All right, and then on the bottom we have 2 times 4, which is 8. So right here I have simplified what was originally in the formula. All right, so let's continue. Okay, so now I got negative 4 plus or minus 16 minus 16 is 0. So negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 8. All right, now negative 4 plus or minus, what's the square root of 0? 0. So now I got that. Okay, so now look, when you get to this part, okay, you got to do two, it's like two problems in one. You got to do both. Addition, you got to treat the problem as if it said negative 4 plus 0 divided by 8, and then do it again as if the problem were negative 4 minus 0 divided by 8. So first I'm going to do the problem using the plus sign on the top, and then I'm going to do it again using the minus sign on the bottom. So if I do it with the plus sign on the top, negative 4 plus 0 is negative 4, and I got an 8 on the bottom. So when you simplify negative 4 over 8, you get negative 1/2. That's your first answer. The second answer is if you do it with the minus sign. Okay, negative 4 minus 0 over 8. You know what? Out of all the examples I did, I didn't realize I put this one at the beginning. So sorry if this causes confusion. But in this one, when I do it, no matter which way I do it, you're going to get the same answer, negative 1/2. So in this particular problem, I didn't mean to put this one first. That was a mistake. Sorry about that. In this particular answer, both answers are the same. For all the other examples that I'm doing in this review, you're going to get two different answers. Okay, but the concept, everything I did is the same. Okay, first I did this using the plus sign and ignoring the minus sign. And then I did it again, ignoring the plus sign, but using the minus sign. All right, let's look at another problem. Okay, guys, here's our second problem. First, let's identify what's A, B, and C. A is 7. B is going to be -2. And C is also going to be -2. All right, so I'm going to plug those values into the formula, which is going to give me x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -2 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 7, times c, which is -2, over 2 times a, which is 7. All right, so let's start simplifying this. -2 equals +2, plus or minus the square root of -2 to the second power is +4. Now let's multiply all three of these numbers together. -4 times 7 is -28, and -28 times -2 is +56. And on the bottom, 2 times 7 is 14. All right, now let's continue to simplify this. This is going to be 2 plus or minus the square root of 60 over 14. Now let's get the square root of 60. So it's going to be 2 plus or minus, and the square root of 60 is, if I round it to the nearest hundredth, 7.75. And on the bottom I have 14. Okay, now from here, you could treat it like two different problems, because we're going to get two different answers, all right? For our first problem, we have to do 2 plus 7.75 divided by 14. Okay, so when I do that in my calculator, 2 plus 7.75 equals divided by 14, I get approximately 0.7 when I round it. So that's my first answer. And for my second answer, I got to do 2 minus 7.75 over 14. All right, so I'll do that in my calculator. 2 minus 7.75 equals divided by 14. And I get approximately negative 0.41. All right, so those are my two answers. And by the way, what that's saying is that if I substitute those either one of those values into the equation for Q, it'll make this equation true. Keep in mind that we're rounding our answers, so really it's not the rounded answer but the full answer. But for the sake of being able to write the answer, we're rounding it. All right, but that's what that means. If you substitute either one of these values into the quadratic equation for the variable Q, it'll make this equation true. These are values that we would not have been able to get if we try to factor, because these are quadratic equations that cannot be factored. So that's why we use the quadratic formula. All right, let's look at our next example. Okay, so again, first identify what's A, B, and C. A is 2, B is 4, C is 2. Now let me plug that into the formula. X equals negative B, so -4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 4 to the second power, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 2. And on the bottom we have 2 times a, which is 2. All right, now when we start simplifying that, we're going to have -4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared is 16. And now if we multiply these three numbers, -4 times 2 is -8. -8 times 2 is -16. And on the bottom, we're going to have 4. Okay, so now this is going to be -4 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 4. This is going to end up giving us two answers that are the same, okay? Because the square root of 0 is 0. And now whether you add 0 or subtract 0, you're going to get the same answer. You get -1. And if I subtract 0, I also get -1. So for this one also, like a previous one, I got the same answer for both. And if you look at the equation and substitute -1 into it, you could do it mental math and see that it works out. All right, -1 to the second power is +1. 1 times 2 is 2. 2, if you multiply negative 1 times 4, you get negative 4. So 2 minus 4 is negative 2, and negative 2 plus 2 equals 0. All right, next example. Okay, so what I want you to see in this example is that there's no C, so that means that C is 0. So A equals 3, B equals 8, and there doesn't appear to be a C, or if you want to think about C as this number, that's fine as well. But either way you look at it, C is 0. All right, so let's plug that into the formula. X equals negative 8 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 8 to the second power, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 0, over 2 times a, so 2 times 3. All right, so I'm going to start simplifying. So I have negative 8 plus or minus the square root, 8 squared is 64. And then if I multiply all three of these numbers together, I'm going to get 0. So basically, when I simplify what's underneath the radical sign, I get 64. On the bottom, I have 6. So it's gonna be negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 is 8 over 6. All right, so now let's do our two problems. First, I do negative 8 plus 8 over 6. Negative 8 plus 8 is 0, and 0 divided by 6 equals 0. So that's my first answer is 0. Okay, my second answer will be if I do negative 8 minus 8 over 6. That's going to give me negative 16 over 6. And when I divide that, let me check what that gives me. 16 divided by 6. I get approximately negative 2.67. Let me write it better down here. Approximately negative 2.67. All right, so those are my two answers, okay? 0 and approximately negative 2.67. Okay, two more examples, guys. So on this example, the main thing I want you to see is that before we begin, you have to arrange it correctly so that it's in the correct form, okay? And there's two different ways to do it, but both ways give you the same answer. One way you could do it is to move the 3g to the second power to the left. If you move 3g to the second power to the left, it's going to become negative 3g to the second power minus g plus 4 equals 0. If you do it that way, then a equals negative 3, and b equals negative 1, and c equals positive 4. You could do it that way, and it works just fine. Another way you could do it is instead of moving 3g squared to the left, move these two to the right, making it 3g squared plus g minus 4, which would make a positive 3, b positive 1, and g, I got confused, c equals to negative 4. Okay, so it doesn't, both ways give you the exact same answer, so it doesn't really make a difference which way you prefer. Let me do it the first way, which I think is the way that most people are going to see it, which is moving 3g squared to the left. All right, so a is going to be negative 3g squared. A is going to be negative 3. B is going to be negative 1 because B is the negative 1 that's in front of this G. And C is going to be positive 4. All right, so let's do it that way. All right, so let me substitute the values into the formula. So X equals negative B, which is going to make it negative negative 1 plus or minus the square root of B to the second power, so negative 1 to the second power, minus 4 times A, which is negative 3, times C, which is 4, over 2 times A is negative 3. Okay, so when I simplify that, I'm going to get positive 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 to the second power is 1. When I multiply these three numbers together, I'm going to get 12 times 4, which is 48, so 1 plus 48, over 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. So that's going to become 1 plus or minus the square root of 49 over negative 6. So that's going to become 1 plus or minus 7, because the square root of 49 is 7, over negative 6. So now let's do our two different problems. If I do 1 plus 7 divided by negative 6, I'm going to have 8 divided by negative 6 and that's going to give me approximately negative 1.33, and that's my first answer. Okay, if I do 1 minus 7 over negative 6, I'm going to get negative 6 over 6. I'm sorry, negative 6 over negative 6, which is going to give me positive 1. All right, so there are my two answers. All right, one more example to go. This is our last example. So again, you got to get everything on the same side so that you can identify what's A, B, and C. If I move negative 7 to the right and put it over here, it becomes positive, and this will become 0. So if I do it that way, then A is going to be 2, B is going to be 9, and C is going to be positive 7. I'm going to substitute the values into the equation, which will give me x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 to the second power minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is 7, over 2 times A, which is 2. So that's going to give me negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81. And when you multiply these three numbers together, you're going to get negative 56 over 4. Okay, now negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus 56 equals 25 over 4. The square root of 25 is 5, so negative 9 plus or minus 5 over 4. Okay, so now my two problems are negative 9 plus 5 over 4. That's going to give me negative 4 over 4, which equals negative 1. That's my first answer. My second answer will be negative 5 minus 5 over 4, which gives me negative 14 over 4. And 14 divided by 4, that's going to give me negative 3.5. All right, and those are my two answers. All right, guys, so this is an important lesson because it's pretty much the only one that we're doing that practices the quadratic formula. There's a good chance, I'll let you know before I play this video, but there's a good chance I'll count this homework for more than one grade, all right? Please make sure to do it. It's not that difficult, just like it's not that difficult to memorize the quadratic formula. If you have any questions, remember you could send me screenshots on Remind or ask me questions on Remind. All right, guys, good luck. That concludes this lesson. I'll see you guys next class. Have a great rest of your day.